Welcome to the DFS Build NBA edition. I'm Kevin Roberts, ready to go over the two-game slate at DraftKings for Wednesday, May 15th. Hopefully, I can help you out a little bit. Hopefully, I helped you out in the last slate. I, for one, did not have much of Jokic. I thought he was going to be a little bit chalky, and if he was going to be really chalky, I was just going to bank on the other top plays of that slate, like Brunson. I like Brunson. He played well. There's nothing wrong with him. He pushed for 60 fantasy points. Jokic just went off, though, and that's just what are you going to do on a two-game slate? A lot of the other plays worked out, though. I liked the Knicks quite a bit, and most of the Knicks I used were totally fine. Hartenstein was great. McBride and Burks both were good, no matter which way you went with them. So hopefully you found a way to cash. I wasn't really high on Jokic. So if you didn't have Jokic, I don't know if you're going to get a takedown last night, but hopefully it worked out for you. Hopefully, I know our MLB advice was pretty good yesterday. We had some luck initially anyways with the Brewers, but the Astros not so much. The pitching was a little bit better, of course. Anyways, onward and upward we go. Let's get a win tonight for sure. I got another two-game slate. Got Boston hosting Cleveland and OKC hosting Dallas. This is probably going to be the end of the Celtics series. The Cavs come in at 14.5-point underdogs. That's pretty gross. And I imagine they lose. Donovan Mitchell and Jarrett Allen are both questionable. Even Karis LeVert has been added to the injury report. So, they're in trouble here. They're probably going to be missing some bodies. By the way, this video is sponsored by DFS Hero. What you see right here is their projection lobby, where you can look at ownership, projection, boom rating, which tells you how good of a smash spot they're in. You can see how much guys are in the optimal lineup. Then you can play around with the actual lineup tools and even their sims. So lots of stuff to look at, player ceiling, fantasy points per minute, projected minutes, all kinds of cool stuff. So give them a shot. You can get a 15% off discount if you use our link in the video description below. If this video helps you at all, please give it a like. Helps me know that I'm helping you guys out a little bit. Also, any comments about how you've been doing, and if I've helped you at all in any way, always love to hear that. I love doing these videos for my own process. It helps me go through it. I enjoy doing it, and I love seeing the subscriber base grow and people interacting, and just seeing that this is actually beneficial to you. So that's awesome. And hopefully that keeps happening. If it does, and you're part of that, benefiting from it, please also subscribe to the channel and keep helping it grow. All right, let's dive right in. We got the Cavs in Boston. Obviously, I'm with the logic here for the sportsbooks favoring Boston greatly. 14.5-point spread is pretty hefty. So you could just, I don't like to really play into the whole blowout thing too much, but it is the playoffs. And if this game gets out of hand, Boston's not going to wait that long to sit their main guys. So it's a little bit interesting to me that Jason Tatum is mega popping in the optimal right now. I think he's like 70+% in the optimal lineup, which is fine because he's the best price stud on the slate right now, especially if Donovan Mitchell misses. So there is logic to it. But if this game goes south in a hurry, as it's projected to, especially if Mitchell and or Jarrett Allen sit, then I don't think you're going to get the ceiling games out of these Boston studs. So I'm just automatically kind of shying away from the Boston guys. I'll just admit that right away. And I'm pretty interested in their values just because they're cheap and they're going to get a little bit of minutes anyways. But if the game blows out, a lot of their value guys are going to be really interested. That said, let's start with the Cleveland side. If Donovan Mitchell's in at 9K flat, he is appealing. Decent 42-point projection. But he's not in the optimal a lot. He is also not owned, which is pretty cool. And he does have a middling boom rating at 16%. So on paper, he doesn't really project as an amazing play. So he's certainly not a core play for me. For tournaments, if he's in at 10% ownership, that's appealing for sure. But I do anticipate Boston winning this game. I'm thinking it is going to be a blowout, and I honestly don't really think Mitchell's going to play. So he's not really on my radar just across the board. If Donovan Mitchell is out, Darius Garland and Karis LeVert are smash plays at the prices. Garland has come up to 6.9K, but he was really good in the last game. And assuming the game stays reasonably close for at least the first 3 quarters, he should still get plenty of minutes, plenty of usage. He is in the optimal lineup 27% of the time. Obviously, the matchup with Drew Holiday sucks, and the prices come up. But right now, he's not pulling any ownership. And I think he's still cheap enough that we can go to him pretty easily if Mitchell is out. Same case for LeVert. LeVert is obviously much more playable, and he'd end up being mega chalk if he is in and Mitchell is out. I'm totally comfortable with eating that chalk at 5.2K. I was obviously very comfortable with doing that in the previous slate, and he did really well. So he'd just be looking at crazy minutes and crazy usage if Mitchell is out. At this price point, if Mitchell is in, I would probably be off of LeVert because he's come up by like $600, and he himself is dealing with an injury, and his role would not be as concrete if Mitchell sits for the second game in a row. So LeVert is just basically, if Spida is out, he's a lock for me. If Spida is in, I'm not going to be as interested. I'd just be, lower on him than the field for sure. Max Strus, I said eventually this dude is going to pop, and he sure did. He popped, had a great game last time. At 4.9K, he was a mega value hit, and now he's coming in at 5.4K. Obviously, across the board, I'm a little bit worried about the Cavs due to the point spread here and just the lack of bodies, but the lack of bodies actually should solidify these guys as pretty safe plays. I mean, if Mitchell and Jarrett Allen are out, I mean, Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, Max Strus, Karis LeVert are just going to be looking at so much usage that I don't even care. I think it's just one of those cases where you just play the Cavs guys, 2 or 3 of them or whatever, and you just hope that they play a little bit longer into a blowout and then the Boston guys don't, Or if you want to, you can just ignore the whole blowout, idea and just play Boston guys across from them too. That's totally fine. But the reality is the usage is going to be monstrous if Donovan Mitchell and Jared Allen are out. Evan Mobley, Darius Garland, and LeVert are standout plays. Strus is very much a play at 5.4K. Not necessarily the same lock to me as those other guys because he's so dependent on hitting his threes. If he doesn't hit his threes, he's going to be a massive failure most likely. But I still really like him at that price point, and because he's going to have an enhanced role, and he's just going to have the green light to shoot like 12 threes. Now, if Karis LeVert is out, then that even more so solidifies Garland for me and Mobley. They would just be getting like all the shots, and the ball would be in their hands a ton. Strus would look way better at 5.4K. Then we'd start looking at 3.8K Isaac Okoro. It doesn't feel good. He's not a good permanent guy, but his role would be solidified at least, so he'd get more usage than he usually does. So that might be a situation where we kind of have to just ignore that he's not a high per minute guy. So I would need him to start. If he starts at 3.8K, he would be in play for sure. The other guy is Sam Merrill at 3.2K. He got like 17 minutes and put up 13 fantasy points in the last game. I mentioned him as a punt if Spida was out. I think at his price point at that point, he worked out. 13 fantasy points for like 3K. That's fine. I mean, I would take that. So same thing again here. If Spida is out, I think Merrill is in play at 3.2K. But if LeVert is out too, then Merrill feels like borderline core play on this slate. And then obviously if the game blows out, guys like Okoro and Merrill would kind of be blowout proof. So that makes them a little bit more appealing. The ownership right now is obviously not on them because we don't know the injury status of these Cavs guys. So that's just something we're going to have to adapt to. And hopefully me looking at this lets you have some kind of idea as to like which way to turn, depending on what news shakes out. Obviously you could have a situation where like Spide is out, but Jared Allen is in and limited, or Allen is out, but Mitchell is in, but LeVert is out. So you just have to kind of adapt as you go. But honestly, the Cavs look awesome across the board based off of potential usage. If everybody's in though, which is like the worst possible scenario for me, if everybody is in, I guess it'd be gross in a hurry. I wouldn't really have a ton of interest in them. I guess Donovan Mitchell would stand out, assuming he's not limited, just because we know he has a ceiling. And then when you just have all the healthy guys on a team in general, like we've been talking about this all year with Boston, like when everybody's there, who really stands out? I guess just the guy with the best price and points per dollar correlation. That's kind of how it'd be. So for me, that would probably be Donovan Mitchell. But I am banking on the Cavs being without 2 or 3 guys here, which makes them a major priority for me on the slate. On the other side are the Celtics. Obviously, Tatum comes in with a 54-point fantasy projection at DFS Hero. That's pretty good, especially when you compare him to SGA and Luka, who I like a lot, but obviously he is significantly cheaper than both of them. So if you want to just save cash and get a guy who can get about what they get usually, I think that's fine logic. You can play Tatum for sure. He's popping in the optimal lineup 76% of the time. He's coming in monster owned at 58%. So while he's a good play, we have to look at the point spread and who the Cavs might end up putting out there. So is a blowout like pretty probable at this point? Right now, it seems like it would be. So I don't think it's outlandish to look at his ownership and the other guys that you can turn to and say, fuck this game. Everybody can eat the Tatum chalk and deal with that because it's not going to work out. So that's probably going to be my strategy, but I'm not here to tell you that Tatum is a bad play. Obviously, popping in the optimal 76% of the time is encouraging, and he's had good games in the series. So I'm not like scared of playing him. It's just something I do, and I take that risk. If somebody's going to be crazy owned, I look for a way to leverage that if I don't feel like I have to play them. So he's had 60-plus fantasy points in each of his last 2 games, but the last time we had a blowout in this series, he only had 45 fantasy points. So actually we had 2 games where we had blowouts in this series, and he did not top 50 fantasy points in either of those games. So if this game goes south, he's probably not going to play the whole game, and I don't think he's going to get there really. Jaylen Brown is significantly cheaper, so if you do want to have a run back to playing this Cavs game, by the way, if you actually think the game's going to be close, then you might be a little bit more inclined to play Tatum. But personally, if either way, I think Jaylen Brown is the better value, 7.9K. He's also got a 21% boom rating, solid 40-point fantasy projection, and the optimal 33% of the time. So I just think that is a pretty good way to leverage the Tatum ownership if you want to still stay in this game on the Boston side. Derek White continues to be nicely priced, 6.5K. I said like a week ago that I didn't think this hot scoring stretch he was on was going to be super sustainable. And that is exactly what happened. He had 3 straight games of 25-plus real points. And since then, in his last 3 games, he has scored 27 total points. So his hot shooting has come and gone. But one major thing with DFS is we don't want to have recency bias, and every game is different. And cold stretches and hot stretches both can come to an end. So while his hot stretch ended and I was right to get off of him, I've kind of been off of him mostly over the last 3 games. This could be a pretty good opportunity to go back to Derek White if his ownership stays in check. Right now, that isn't the case. At 38%, he's coming in chalky because obviously Boston is a massive favorite. They're at home, and he's a good price. So if you want to play Derek White, no qualms about it. I just don't love the idea of eating that chalk right now. I would like to play him a little bit more than Drew Holiday, who has been just killing me as chalk lately, and he's just producing, and it's really annoying because he's been super efficient, and it's just like he's not a high usage guy. The last two games he's averaged 10.5 shot attempts, and he's shooting like 60+%. So that's helped him get to 38 and 41 fantasy points, and he crushed as chalk in both games. So annoying. I wish his price would come up, and that would kind of lower interest in him. So in a vacuum, Drew Holiday is a good play. He's not even 6K. He comes in with almost a 30-point fantasy projection, a respectable 18% boom rating, in the optimal 48% of the time. Pure salary play. I don't trust that he's going to keep this going and be so efficient to the point where he's getting 40 fantasy points every game. And he's coming in at 36% ownership. So what I would do, I would hope the Derek White ownership dips and like Drew Holiday spikes. And if we get to that point where we see that later in the day, I would have a lot more interest in eating $700 more and going to Derek White, who, judging by the way these guys have been playing, should be a little bit less owned. And when you factor in salary. So I'm banking on the Drew Holiday hot streak to end and the Derek White cold streak to end. So that's the way I would play it. But both guys look totally fine when you look at their salaries. Al Horford has been awful, but this is another cold streak guy that I actually don't mind going to just because Porzingis remains out and he's going to be pushing for 30 minutes in a competitive game. He has literally shot 0 for 10 for 3 in his last 2 games, 4 for 16 in his last 2 games. So if you think Al Horford's going to keep missing shots, go ahead and keep fading him. He has not been great, obviously, for DFS. He topped 20 fantasy points 1 time in the series. I'm just going to, at 5.3, he's getting those minutes. I'm just going to bank that at some point he's going to have a game where he hits a few shots from outside and, pays off. So I think he's still good value. His ownership isn't out of control. So yeah, I like Al Horford just fine at 5.3. Now, like I said, the blow is very real. The blow risk is very real here. So I do not mind at all looking to Peyton Pritchard, Luke Cornett, or Sam Hauser. Obviously, the most reliable option there is Peyton Pritchard because he already is going to get 20-plus minutes regardless. But if this game gets out of control, blows out, he's going to also play the fourth quarter. So I think he's the easiest guy to pay down for on Boston's side. But if you think this game's going to blow out, you can also look to Cornett or Hauser at 3.6 and 3.2K. All right, so that does it for Boston's side. In general, though, I personally don't want to stack this game. So I'd rather take the high usage with Cleveland and maybe one or probably just one of the Boston punts so we can benefit from that possible blowout. And then I'm stacking this other game. So this other game, the Dallas side, Dallas and OKC, it's a 4-point spread. Dallas is seriously tied 2-2. We got game 5 here with Dallas heading to OKC and a 212.5 total. So everything about this game is more appealing. Tight spread, higher total. We're going to get a little bit of faster pace, a little bit less defense on the Dallas side. So it just looks like the better game to stack across the board. Also, very, very interesting. We can start right away with the Mavs. Luka's coming in with 17% ownership. His price has dipped a little bit. Last time I was basically saying the same strategy that I'm going to say again, and it was to fade chalky Tatum and go pay for Luka. And that's what I'm going to do today. I will just remind you, Tatum is a good play. There's nothing wrong with playing Tatum. And there's reasons to not want Luka. Tatum's majorly in the optimal. Tatum has a great projection, but he's very, very owned. So I am going to bank on Tatum not getting there and Luka finally having a monster game in a huge, crucial game 5. So that's my personal high-level strategy when I'm looking at the studs. And when Luka's only 17% owned, I think that makes a lot of sense to take that shot. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. If you don't want to go with me and do that, that leverage play, you don't have to do that. But the reality is he still has the best projection in the slate. We know he has an insane ceiling if he can deliver. His price has come down. He does have a 32% boom rating, and he is in the optimal at least 26% of the time. So it's not like he's not showing up in the top lineup. So so that's all encouraging, and I love the ownership play here. So I love Luka tonight, and not everyone is going to be playing him. So that sounds good. Kyrie Irving is an okay play at 8.2K. His price keeps coming down. Like usual, he's deferring to Luka a little bit. So I think he's still a good price. He can go off in any spot here. Let me just double check how he's been doing. So I have actual numbers to throw at you. Not great in the last game, 23 fantasy points. He's just not exhibited a really high ceiling. I would imagine he's going to show up at some point. Game 5 would be a pretty good time to do it. He's carrying a little bit of ownership at 26%. 20% boom rating. I think he's an okay play. But like I said, I'm going with Luka here. He's less owned than Kyrie, and he's got just an awesome ceiling that I just am going to hope that he finally taps into. Really interesting play here is PJ Washington. I had been saying for quite a while that he just gets monster minutes, and we know he has upside. So he's a guy that is worth playing if his price isn't going to budge. And sure enough, he has crushed in 3 straight games. He remains a good play. He's too cheap at 6.3K for who he's been in this series. He has literally put up 40-plus fantasy points in 3 straight games. He had a 58-point fantasy game 3 games ago. And he's played like 40 minutes. So on paper, there's really no reason to not play PJ Washington. The only reason I would not play PJ Washington is to gain leverage if he's crazy chalk. The funny thing is right now he's not. He's coming at 23% owned. So I came into this thinking I would have to reluctantly fade Washington and the hot streak he's on. But as it stands, I don't think I'll be doing that. I think he's a really good play. If that ownership goes the other way, we could fade PJ Washington and just hope this unsustainable hot streak comes to an end, which is entirely possible. That's just something we have to kind of try to project to some degree. You don't want to fade everybody who's on fire, and you don't want to play everybody who's cold. But at some point, talent wins out, and the guys who are struggling get going, and the other side of the matchup locks up on the guy or switch up their strategy and make somebody else beat you instead of PJ Washington, maybe. But as it stands, 23% ownership isn't enough to get me away from him at this nice 6.3K price. So I like him a good deal. Then you have Daniel Gafford and Derek Lively. Lively's coming in as super chalk, 48% owned. In theory, I don't have a problem with that because he's 4.2K and he is going to push for about 25 minutes a game. He's getting 23, 25 fantasy points. I think that's totally fine at that price. What I've been saying lately, though, is basically whatever Dallas center isn't super owned, I'm going to go the other way. So Daniel Gafford they're basically splitting the center minutes. So they can both project about 25 minutes. Daniel Gafford's way more expensive, though, and doesn't project that much more than him. So he's coming in at only 13% ownership. So just as a really nice, fairly safe way to gain leverage on the field is to just go pay the extra money for Gafford and get him at basically no ownership for a 2-game slate and fade like just a mega chalky Lively who could easily bust. Derrick Jones Jr. looks decent as far as value is concerned for the Mavs. 27 minutes. His last game was super efficient scoring. Had 4 blocks. He had 30 fantasy points, so he was a good value play last time. I don't really see much reason to get away from that now. He's only 20% owned. A lot of the ownership is going to be on Tim Hardaway Jr., who I do not have a problem with playing at all. 3.5K for a guy who played 23 minutes in the last game. That's really cheap. He obviously had not been healthy coming into this series, but now he's played 16 plus minutes in every single game. So the only deterrent is that he's coming at 39% ownership. So if he's going to be crazy chalky like that, I think we can entertain the fade, but he's just really cheap, and we know he's going to play about 20 minutes off the bench and get decent usage. So I'm okay with playing him. If you find another guy in that price range, or you just don't feel like you absolutely need him as a punt, then you can entertain being underweight or fading him for sure. On the other side, we have the Thunder. Everybody looks good for OKC because Dallas remains a pretty good matchup. Obviously, OKC is at home. That is beneficial to them. Right off the bat, SGA looks amazing. 10.1K his price is coming up to about where it was during the regular season. So finally, SGA is priced right. So that's nothing. That's no reason to get away from him at all. He looks great. He has been absolutely crushing. He has 29 plus real points in every game in this series. He has 59 plus fantasy points in every game in this series. Dallas has done nothing to slow him down. Priced right, good matchup, great production in the series, 37% in the optimal lineup, 37% boom rating. Only issue at all is that he's going to be owned at 47%, but on a 2-game slate, I don't really give a shit. I love the idea of pairing SGA with Luka if I can do it. No qualms about paying for SGA at all. And if you want to just ignore my love for Luka on this slate, you can just have SGA be your stud or pair him with Tatum like that worked out the last slate. If you would have ignored my Luka infatuation on the last slate, that would have done well. So you can certainly do that as well. There's just going 2 chalky studs, and you have to hope Luka doesn't break the slate. Chet Holmgren at 7K continues to be too cheap. He finally smashed in his last game. Well, smashed is a relative term. 39.75 fantasy points, tied for his best game of the series. So he's had a good but not great series. His price isn't high enough, though, for what his ceiling can be. That said, 58% ownership for a guy who's not exhibited like a clearly really, really good ceiling. I don't know if I want to eat that chalk. I would rather go get what could be a low-owned Evan Mobley. Or last slate, he and Jalen Williams were coming in with a similar projection, but the ownership was flipped, where Chet was basically like half the ownership of Jalen. Right now, that's the other way. So now I'm very interested in Jalen Williams instead of Chet. Jalen is $600 more, projects just under Chet, but instead of 58% ownership, you're looking at 36% ownership at DFS Hero. So yeah, Jalen Williams looks way, way better to me. And if it's worth noting, he had 41 fantasy points in the last game, and they've been comparable the entire series. It's like you're basically looking at the same guy, but you have to pay a little bit more for one that's lower owned. I will value the ownership dip over the price. I'm out on Josh Giddey. His prices come way down, so that's cool, but they're just not playing him at all. So he's lost his role basically. That makes me interested in Aaron Wiggins and Isaiah Joe. Check the lineups to see if Aaron Wiggins ends up starting. He only played 13 minutes last game, which is a little discouraging, but he had been getting 20 plus. So that's a little bit alarming. Isaiah Joe got 15 minutes. He's getting 15 plus minutes. So these guys are viable values, but are they safe? No. I almost would rather just roll with the Boston guys and really hope that game blows out instead of taking dives with the OKC dudes. The only value for OKC that I really continue to like is going to be Dort. His price remains pretty good at 4.8K for a guy who's going to push for 40 minutes if he can stay on the court. He's been obviously dealing with foul trouble this entire series, 5+ fouls in every single game because he's tasked with guarding Luka. But he can get hot from outside. He's going to be out there, and he can luck his way into other stats. So it worked out really well in the most recent game with 30 fantasy points. If you don't think it will work out this time, he's coming in at monster 46% ownership, so you can certainly make a pivot there or just pay down for somebody else like Peyton Pritchard, Tim Hardaway Jr., or just pay up also for somebody else. I'm probably just going to eat that chalk just because I know he's going to be out there for 40 minutes. I mean, they will let him foul out before they'll bench him because they need him to try to slow Luka down. All right, that is going to do it for me. Overall strategy for me personally is probably going to be paying for on a 2-game slate, basically an unknown Luka. So I love that. And then I already went over a lot of the values that I like and the mid-range guys that I like. I'll be pretty Cavs heavy, assuming Mitchell and Allen are out. And then if I can get a second stud in there, I would prioritize SGA over Tatum, who's going to be chalkier and is in the worst game with more blowout risk. So that does it for me. Hopefully I helped you out a little bit. If I did, please give this video a like and also consider subscribing to the channel. Let's get a big one tonight. Good luck. Thanks for watching.